India Tonight. I'm Shibani, Ghara, joining you from our Mumbai studio, and joining us from our Delhi studio is my colleague Sumita, Kareer. Now, US President Donald Trump said that he will nominate former Federal Reserve official Kevin Warsh to be the next chair of the Fed, a pick likely to result in sharp changes to the powerful agency that could bring it closer to the White House and reduce its long-time independence from day-to-day politics. Warsh would replace the current chair, Jerome Powell, when his term expires in May. Now, Trump chose Powell to lead the Fed in 2017, but this year has relentlessly assailed him for not cutting interest rates quickly enough. Sumita, interesting appointment and something that has been going on.
The appointment which requires Senate confirmation. This amounts to a return trip for Warsh, 55, who was a member of the Fed's board from 2006 to 2011. So he has that experience. In fact, he was the youngest governor in history when he was appointed at the age of 35. He is currently a fellow at the right-leaning Hoover Institution and a lecturer at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Remember, Warsh's appointment would be a major step towards Trump administration asserting more control over the Fed, one of the few remaining independent federal agencies. In fact, while all presidents influence Fed policy through appointments, Trump's rhetorical attacks on the central bank have raised concerns about its status as an independent institution. And of course, joining us to discuss this development further and what really means, what this move means for Fed's independence and how is this being seen geopolitically. We're now joined by Adele Nazarian. She is a geopolitical strategist. Later on, we'll also be joined in by a market expert as well to decode what this essentially means for the markets and how our investors really looking at this development. Thank you very much, Adele, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. First things first, do you anticipate any kind of change that the Fed is going to take as far as the central bank is concerned? And will there be any policy changes? And if there will be any policy changes, then does that really reflect a deferred stance in terms of what the United States really means, for global trade and for other global geopolitical developments?
So great to be on with you. Thank you so much. A very historic nomination. I think that Warsh's pending nomination, President Trump announced it, is actually a very smart and strategic move. I think that based on his background, his historic political leanings, being a fiscal conservative, there's no, for example, short evidence or indication that he would automatically cut interest rates, for example. He's very data-driven and credibility-focused and not politically reactive, which is very important, especially considering the current situation with the United States economically, geopolitically, and all the above. From his time when he was at the Federal Reserve System, working with it between 2006 and 2011, he was really generally seen as being more cautious about keeping rates too low for too long. And he really focused on long-term institutional credibility. So I think that he was historically more worried about inflation and financial imbalances than about short-term growth boosts. So I think that with him, Trump has made a pretty solid nomination, and he's going to act independently of what is politically viable and what is most economically sound for the Federal Reserve and for the nation's financial coffers.
Adele, if you can help us understand, the Warsh nomination comes in after this unusually public battle between Trump and Jerome Powell. And if you can help us understand from a geopolitical standpoint, how this might be perceived, especially the politicization of, the entire Fed. How can it erode the equity and influence, many of the multilateral institutions like IMF and G20 even?
So I have to say that, this is not Warsh's first time serving and working with President Trump under him. He served previously under President Donald Trump during his first term, during his predecessor's administration in his economic advisory roles, including the NEC executive secretary. And I have to say that this shows that he's comfortable operating inside the political system, but not as a reputation of having a political lobbyist or ideologue what I think this signals to the global monetary, financial institutions is that he is, he's to be taken seriously by places like the global central banks, financial markets, policy institutions. He's definitely also shown, frankly, willingness to dissent with the Fed, right? And his professional credibility, of course, depends on the market trust. And I think that he has definitely, proven that he's someone who isn't going to act on emotion. He's going to not be deterred or persuaded by any kind of political rhetoric, and that's his job. That's going to be his job to keep the financial systems that are running the United States and the Fed running on high gear. And I feel like he's, his independent streak, being with the Hoover Institution, what he's done is very, very solid. And it shows, honestly, markets trust. And I think it's going to help, frankly, in terms of the way the global markets and global institutions see the United States with this nomination.
Right, Adele, but should the world be concerned on, whether Warsh's worldview is going to change how the U.S. uses interest rates and dollar liquidity as tools of global influence?
I don't believe so. I think that he's going to be doing what's best in terms of numbers. I think he's a very practical, logical man who understands, that raised, the way no harsh cuts. He's not going to go by what President Trump is advising him to do directly if he doesn't think it's going to be a sound economic decision. And I have to say, there's examples historically of Fed chairs who have resisted, presidents. You have Paul Volcker versus, Carter at the time, William McChesney Martin versus Lyndon B. Johnson, Jerome Powell, and, resisting White House pressure under Trump. So I really think that there's definitely, something there, considering his own history, to suggest that Warsh will seek to probably align more so on broader economic goals, and he will maintain an open dialogue, open lines of communication with the administration. But I think that when things, let's say a decision is made that is too drastic economically, I do not see him taking any kind of stance that would
on that note, Adele, if you can help us understand, sorry to interrupt you, if you can help us understand what would be his priorities, according to you, for the next 3 months to stabilize the market, to reassure both domestic and international investors?
Frankly, I think that this would require, he already has solid relationships built in. I think that the first 90 days, honestly, might look like, if he is actually nominated, which I think he will probably be to emphasize policy continuity, stabilize expectations on a global scale, to basically expect phrases to come out of his stances, like credibility is our most powerful tool. It will remain, policy will remain disciplined, evidence-based. I think that's sort of the track that we're on, to basically reinforce credibility of the United States and the financial prowess of the United States. I think that Warsh has shown historically that he does worry about, financial distortions, and he values long-term price stability. So I think that he's going to reaffirm inflation targets. I see him avoiding premature rate cuts. And I think that he will stress and emphasize patience over speed, which is a bit of a contrast with what, President Trump has done. Of course, he wants things to happen in a very timely fashion, but I think that communication is going to be key here, and pacing themselves. I think that's what he's going to be doing. And frankly, instead of shocking the markets, I do see Warsh using and implementing a strategy of gradualism. I think that's going to be the key, stabilizing the markets and making it so that everyday Americans, frankly, can sort of return and resume to some sort of normalcy in the economic day-to-day activities. And I think he's going to go about making that a priority, because beyond 2026, beyond 2028, the Republicans obviously still want to have their candidates in office, and they want to maintain the strength, and that's going to rely heavily how the economy is going to be looking. So Warsh has a very, very important role to fill, and I think that his first 90 days will be focused on helping America regain some sort of normalcy in terms of the everyday markets, and I hope he'll be able to accomplish that.
And sharing your viewpoints on the new appointment.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, it is time for us to slip into a very short break. You don't go anywhere. We will be right back.